Good morning. I'm Ramil Cueto. I'm from Batangas City. And today I'm very happy to have Mr. Willison. Kuya Robin, good morning.
Good morning.
To help me bring to you great information, important information about disaster awareness and preparedness. Before we start, I just want to make mention that Kuya Robin is an expert, long-time expert in disaster risk management, and he has contributed a lot to the works of the United Nations all over the world in this particular topic. So, Kuya Robin, my first question for you today is, can you help us define what is disaster awareness and preparedness for our audience?
Well, awareness means that people understand what kind of hazards hit in their particular location.
Hazards.
So, here in Batangas City, we have Taal, and Taal occasionally erupts, and also we get earthquakes from Taal every once in a while, in fact fairly common. Then of course we have the Baguio, we have the storms coming from the eastern side, coming across the Philippines. So awareness is being aware of what kind of hazards impact an area, and then also, along with that,
let me ask you something about that definition. So, I think the key word that you mentioned is hazards. Is that man-made, natural? How do you expand that?
Okay, a hazard is something which impacts an area from the outside, if you like. We have to move from hazards to the impact is our response to that hazard.
Okay.
How
we deal with that hazard.
Yes, so if it is too great and we're very poorly prepared, then very quickly it becomes a disaster. A disaster means that the local people are unable to cope with the problem.
So if I understood the definition, the hazards are what would trigger a disaster or catastrophe. Is that correct?
Yes, there are things from nature which impact a certain area. And then, as I say, from the human perspective, it's our response to those hazards which is most important.
Because the response to the hazard can mitigate or minimize the after effect, correct?
Well, the thing is, I'm a civil engineer, and so one of the things I see happening, particularly in the Philippines, is people building new roads. And often those new roads are not built with respect to the hazards that are impacting that area. For instance, up in the Cordillera region, roads were just put through the mountains, and then the hillside above began to fall down, and then below the road began to fall down the slope because there was not proper protection. So disaster preparedness should be part of everything that is done in the way of development.
Now I understand that proper planning, infrastructure, most particularly, and even commercial industrial development must consider the creation of these potential hazards.
Well, the other thing, of course, is the building of buildings, building of factories. Often they're put in places which are quite hazard prone, close to rivers or on steep slopes. And again, the same thing, there needs to be a proper preparedness factor built into the development.
I understand.
The other thing that happens is that people don't realize that when you put in subdivisions, when you put in roads, then you are covering the soil. Because when it comes to rain, which is one of our biggest problems at the moment, the rain, when it comes down, it needs to sink into the soil and then go out gradually. If you concrete everywhere, if you put tarmac everywhere, then all of that water has to go away at the same time. In other words, it doesn't soak into the soil. We need to dispose of it very quickly. And that means that we have to have a much better drainage system, although here in the country it's not so much, but in Batangas City itself, you know what happens whenever we have heavy rains.
That's right. It dawns to me from what you said that disaster awareness and preparedness require a thorough understanding of the landscape, geography, topography, the elements, and all things that pertain to environment. I wanted to now segue to my next question. So you've been here in Batangas for 20 years, is that right?
24.
24 years, and you've pretty much traveled in different parts of the province, so you know the landscape. What do you see are the hazards that are in the province right now that needs to be addressed?
Well, I noticed there's quite a bit along the Kalampang River where they're putting higher sides along the side so it doesn't flood the settlement on each side of the river.
Right.
But has enough thought been put into that? Means that instead of the water flooding out, now it's all going to come down at once.
That's right.
Because they found in some places that they have to allow local land to flood, because if it doesn't, a very large amount of water goes down the river at the same time. This particularly actually happened in China, a place that I visited one time, the Dongting Lake. The Yangtze used to go into the Dongting Lake and sit in there and then gradually go down towards Shanghai. And then they said, no, this is very fertile, so they put up these big walls everywhere, these levees, made of sandbags particularly, and then the water went straight down to Shanghai, and the water levels of the floods were getting higher and higher and higher in that city. So it's another factor to be considered here in Batangas City.
I think what you're telling us in looking at the hazards within an area, a city, a barangay, or the whole province, we need to look into how nature behaves. Like, for instance, the water flow has to be understood, where it goes, how to direct it, and etc. What other hazards do you see happening? Right now we are in development stage, and roads, bridges, infrastructures, heavy infrastructure being built. What sort of hazards are presented by those things?
I think we also need to consider maybe a little bit more earthquakes. Because a study was done by Japan, JICA, into earthquakes in Manila. And it said the largest earthquake that has happened there is 7.2 in the Richter scale. And that would cause an immense amount of damage if it happened again. And then a lot of the people living in Manila would have to go out in order to stay alive and find food, and many of them may turn up even here in Batangas. So have we considered that at all?
Right. And its potential disastrous effects to the coastal barangays, coastal cities, and part of the province. Thanks for that. I wanted to go to the third question, which is, I think, also very important. What do you think are the broad solutions that we can implement in Batangas Province in regard to disaster awareness, preparedness, and risk management?
Well, I think progressively disaster risk reduction, which was advocated particularly at the national level, has now been coming down to the municipality, the city level, the province level, and then down to the barangay level. And I think that the training, constant training, needs to take place.
Constant training.
And preparedness activities, in other words, simulations, have also been found useful. Years ago, I did a seminar actually in Thailand, in Bangkok, for what to do if there was an emergency in a big building. In other words, if we went through everything from somebody coming in with a gun into the front of the business,
what are you going to do?
Or a fire in the business, or whatever, or an earthquake and part of it collapsed. So preparedness in buildings and things like, for instance, the shape of stairs. Stairs have to be, we've found an optimum size of stairs. how wide should be the tread and how high should be every rising. So those kind of things, if they're incorporated into the development, they help to make the people safer in the long term. If stairs are very steep, people fall down them, they find it difficult to get up and down and so on. So, I mean, that's another simple practical detail.
Right. The way I understood you is that when you're planning to build something or do something large or big, there should be enough exploration of details, potential hazards, sources, accidents, and plan and design and implement according to specification, so that in the event of a disaster, in the event of a quake or typhoon or flooding, you have resilience and not only resilience, but also I think it's quite important that there should be training and mock drills and sort of get people trained to react and respond properly. Would you say?
Yeah, it's not when a disaster hits.
Okay.
It's when a hazard hits.
When the hazard
A
hits.
disaster is when we're not prepared.
That's correct.
Where we've done inappropriate development.
It's a good distinction. We can be proactive by being prepared, being aware, and having the system and resources in place so that when a hazard happens and becomes a disaster, people know what to do and we can.
So one of the key factors is simulations. So that when something happens, people don't have to think, what did they hear they should do? They've already done it, and they're much more likely to do it if they've actually done it at least once than they are if they have to think what to do. So it's building in reactions into people. Something happens, they've already simulated it, so they know what to do, and they do it automatically instead of having to think through what to do.
Practice makes perfect. That applies to everything. Wow, thanks very much. I wanted to thank you first for contributing your extensive knowledge on the subject. And I just wanted to conclude today's interview. We've addressed three things. One is, what is a disaster, awareness, preparedness, risk management. We need to understand this is just the beginning of the understanding, because if we understand properly, then we can make a plan, we can design, implement real and effective solutions. Number two, we talked about Batangas Province in general being a coastal province. There's a lot of potential hazards that are in here, either caused by natural reasons and man-made reasons. And finally, we look into some of the broad solutions, and we talked about scenario planning, also rehearsing even if there's no disaster yet, which will contribute to more familiarity with what to do and not be in chaos as one of the potential broad solutions. So thanks very much, and if you're interested in this topic, disaster awareness and preparedness, feel free to let me know, because as your future board member here in Batangas Province, 5th District, this is one of my top priorities. Thanks very much and have a great day.